They say the scariest monsters aren't the ones hiding under the bed, but the ones who walk freely in daylight: neighbors, strangers, people who pass you by in the grocery store. Home is supposed to be the safest place, the one space where the locks on the door separate you from everything outside. But what if those locks mean nothing? What if the very walls you trust can't protect you? This story isn't about ghosts or shadows. It's about something far worse: real people. It's about the night a family thought they were safe, only to realize someone was already inside. At first, it started small: creaking footsteps dismissed as the house settling, doors left ajar when no one remembered touching them, and the faint sound of breathing in a room that should have been empty. But as the night unfolded, those signs turned into something undeniable: an intruder, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment. What made it even more terrifying wasn't just that their home had been breached, but that they had been chosen, singled out for reasons tied to something deeper, something far more sinister than simple theft. By the time they understood the truth, it was already too late. The Johnson family had lived in their modest suburban home for just over 3 years. To them, the small 2-story house represented stability, safety, and the quiet dream they had worked so hard to achieve. Marcus, the father, worked long shifts as a delivery driver, often returning late at night, while his wife, Alicia, balanced part-time work at a local clinic with caring for their 2 children, 10-year-old Jordan and 6-year-old Maya. The neighborhood was the kind that advertised itself as family-friendly: tree-lined streets, trimmed lawns, and quiet evenings. But behind the polite smiles and casual greetings, the Johnsons always felt slightly out of place. They were one of only a handful of black families in a predominantly white community. At first, it was subtle: the curious stares when they moved in, the too loud compliments about how well-spoken Marcus was, or the neighbors' awkward jokes about how lucky the area was to be so diverse now. They brushed it off, convincing themselves that it was nothing malicious, just ignorance. But the longer they lived there, the more they noticed. Packages went missing from their doorstep when others didn't. Their children were left out of neighborhood playdates. A complaint was filed with the homeowners association over the color of their front door, even though several others on the block had painted theirs in similar shades. None of these things were outright confrontations, but together they built a heavy atmosphere, a reminder that the Johnsons were tolerated but not truly welcome. Still, inside their home, they carved out a sanctuary. Family dinners around the kitchen table, movie nights with popcorn, the children's laughter echoing down the halls, these were the moments that made them feel safe. The house became their shield against the subtle hostility that simmered beyond their front yard. That night, however, the shield began to crack. Marcus had been scheduled for an overnight shift, leaving Alicia alone with the kids. She followed her usual evening routine, locking the doors, checking the windows, and setting out snacks for the children before bedtime. The autumn wind rattled against the siding of the house, the trees scraping softly against the upstairs windows. The kids begged for one more cartoon before bed, and Alicia, tired but indulgent, agreed. By 9:30, the house was dark and quiet. Alicia tucked Maya in first, then Jordan, whispering goodnight as she switched off the hallway light. She lingered for a moment in her bedroom, scrolling on her phone, listening to the comforting rhythm of her children's breathing through the baby monitor she still used out of habit. But as the hours stretched on, something began to feel off. The faint creak of the stairs, subtle, but distinct. At first, she thought it might be the house settling, or maybe Marcus coming home early. She checked her phone. No message, no missed call. The unease didn't leave her. When she got up to check the locks again, she found the back door unlocked. She was certain she had bolted it earlier. She double-checked the front door, too. It was still locked, secure. She told herself she must have been distracted when she'd done her rounds, brushed it off as exhaustion. But as she headed back upstairs, she couldn't shake the prickling sensation crawling across her skin, the feeling of being watched. Somewhere deep down, Alicia knew that night wasn't going to be like any other. Alicia tried to shake the unease, but it clung to her like a second skin. She turned off her phone and forced herself back under the covers, listening for the wind, for the creak of pipes or the hum of the refrigerator, ordinary sounds she could anchor herself to. For a while, it worked. Her eyes began to grow heavy, but then it came again, the creak. This time, not faint, not a maybe. A deliberate groan of wood, the kind that only happened when weight pressed against it. Someone was on the stairs. Her first thought was Marcus, maybe he had come home early after all. But if that were true, why hadn't he called out? Why hadn't she heard the front door? The silence was worse than the sound itself. She sat up, her chest tightening, every nerve on alert. The baby monitor on the nightstand crackled softly, a faint shift of static. Slowly, Alicia got out of bed. She patted across the carpet, careful not to make a sound, and opened her bedroom door. The hallway stretched before her, dark except for the faint nightlight near the kids' room. Everything was still. Too still. She stepped out, her bare feet cold against the floorboards. Then she froze. The nightlight flickered, dimmed, then went out completely. The hallway was swallowed in shadow. Her instincts screamed at her to run to her children's room, but as she moved forward, she caught it, a sound so quiet, she almost convinced herself she imagined it. Breathing. Slow, controlled, deliberate breathing. Not coming from behind her. Not from her children's room. From the closet at the end of the hall. Her throat went dry. She wanted to scream, to call out, but some instinct told her not to. Whoever was in that closet wanted her to. Instead, she backed up slowly, inch by inch, until she reached her bedroom door. She slipped inside, turned the lock, and grabbed her phone. The signal was weak, one bar flickering in and out. She tried dialing Marcus, then 911, but the calls wouldn't connect. Her stomach dropped. The wind outside had knocked the service out before, but tonight, it felt like a cruel trick of fate. She tried again and again, only to be met with silence. That was when she heard Maya's voice. "Mommy?" It came faint, muffled, through the baby monitor. Alicia's blood ran cold. Maya was supposed to be asleep in her room. But the voice wasn't coming from upstairs, it was distorted, low, echoing unnaturally through the device, like someone standing too close to the microphone. Alicia's trembling hand lowered the monitor. It wasn't her daughter. Someone was in her children's room. Heart pounding, she unlocked her door and ran barefoot down the hall. She burst into Maya's room, flicking on the light. The bed was empty, sheets crumpled. Panic seized her chest until she heard a soft whimper. She turned, finding Maya crouched under the bed, wide-eyed, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Relief surged, but before Alicia could pull her out, Jordan's scream tore through the house. It came from his room. She rushed down the hall, dragging Maya with her. Jordan's door was open, and he stood frozen near the window, pointing. Alicia followed his gaze, and saw it. The closet door in his room, cracked open. A pale hand curling around the edge. Alicia grabbed both children, pulling them close. She slammed Jordan's door shut and shoved a chair beneath the handle. The three of them huddled in the corner, her body shielding theirs. For a moment, silence. Then, the slow scrape of something dragging across the floor inside the closet. Her mind raced. Why them? Why here? And then she remembered. The stairs at the grocery store. The way neighbors' eyes followed Marcus when he walked home at night. The muttered comments under their breath when they thought the Johnsons couldn't hear. It wasn't random. Whoever was in their home hadn't chosen them by accident. The sound grew louder, closer, until it stopped directly behind the closet door. A single knock, deliberate and sharp, echoed through the room. Alicia's hands shook as she held her children tighter. The locks they trusted, the walls they thought safe, meant nothing. They had been marked long before the intruder ever stepped foot inside. And now, trapped in their own home, there was no guarantee they would make it out alive. The chair braced against Jordan's door rattled violently, the legs scraping against the hardwood. Alicia clutched her children, pressing them into the farthest corner of the room. Every instinct told her to run, but where? They were trapped upstairs, an intruder between them and the only exit. The door groaned under pressure, hinges straining as the knob twisted back and forth. Then it stopped. Silence. Almost worse than the sound itself. Alicia's breath came in shallow gasps, her ears straining for the smallest noise. She could hear her children's muffled sobs against her chest, the rapid thump of their tiny hearts. Then, a voice. Low, distorted, carrying a cruel amusement. It didn't shout. It whispered, deliberate, as though savoring the fear it created. You don't belong here. The words cut through Alicia like ice. She had heard them before, from neighbors who smiled too tightly, from strangers at the store who eyed her family as though they were intruding. But now, those words weren't just prejudice, they were a threat. The door slammed again, harder this time, splintering near the lock. Dust rained from the frame. Jordan screamed, and Maya buried her face into Alicia's side. The chair held, but not for long. Alicia's eyes darted around the room, searching desperately for anything, a weapon, an escape, a plan. The window. It was the only way. She rushed over, yanking the curtains aside. Below was the dark backyard, the grass slick with dew, the fence looming beyond. It wasn't safe, but it was better than waiting. She forced the window open, the old frame squealing in protest. She lifted Maya first, whispering for Jordan to follow. Just as she was about to climb out herself, the door burst inward, the chair toppling to the floor with a crash. A figure filled the doorway. Masked. Tall. Dressed in dark clothes that blended with the shadows. But the mask wasn't ordinary, it was painted white, blank except for two crude black holes for eyes, giving the impression of emptiness. The sight was more chilling than if he had shown his face. Alicia froze, halfway out the window, her body caught between fight and flight. The figure stepped forward slowly, confidently, savoring her fear. In his hand glinted something metallic. Not a knife. Something heavier. A crowbar. The message was clear. This wasn't about theft. It was about destruction. Alicia shoved Jordan out the window, then threw herself after him. Her foot slipped, her leg scraping painfully against the frame as she landed hard on the grass below. Pain shot up her side, but she didn't stop. She grabbed both children, urging them toward the fence. Behind her, the intruder leaned out the window, the blank mask glowing pale in the moonlight. He didn't chase immediately. He didn't have to. The slow tilt of his head told her everything. He was enjoying this. Hunting them wasn't about speed, it was about terror. They reached the fence, but it was taller than Alicia remembered. She tried boosting Jordan first, then Maya, but her hands trembled, slick with sweat. The children scrambled over, tumbling into the neighbor's yard. She was next, clawing at the wood, when a sound froze her in place. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, approaching from the side of the house. Another one. Her blood ran cold. It wasn't just one intruder. They had been surrounded. She screamed at her children to run, even as her own body twisted to face the threat. Two masked figures now stood in the yard, blocking the way forward. Their masks were identical, blank, white, faceless. They advanced slowly, closing the distance. For a brief, horrifying moment, Alicia realized the truth. This wasn't random. This was planned. Organized. And the message was clear: you don't belong here. The figures closed in, and the Johnsons' fight for survival reached its breaking point. Alicia's scream echoed into the night, slicing through the stillness of the neighborhood. Somewhere, a dog barked, then another. Porch lights flicked on one by one, spilling yellow halos into the darkness. The masked intruders froze at the sound, their confidence faltering as the neighborhood stirred awake. Seizing the moment, Alicia hauled herself over the fence, her palms tearing against the rough wood. She hit the ground hard but didn't stop. She scooped Jordan and Maya close, pushing them toward the light of the nearest porch. Behind them, the figures lingered in the shadows, unwilling to step further into view. Their blank faces tilted once, then disappeared back into the darkness as quickly as they had come. The family stumbled up the neighbor's steps, banging on the door until it opened. Relief washed over them when a startled elderly couple pulled them inside, locking the door behind them. Alicia collapsed into the entryway, clutching her children, her body trembling with adrenaline and pain. Police arrived minutes later, their flashing lights painting the quiet street in jarring reds and blues. Officers swept the house, but the intruders were gone, vanished as if they had never been there. No fingerprints. No signs of forced entry beyond the splintered doorframe. Just silence, and the echo of those words, "You don't belong here." But it wasn't silence for Alicia. It was a message, loud and clear, echoing in every creak of the house, every glance from a neighbor that lingered too long. The attack hadn't been about theft. Nothing was stolen. No valuables touched. It had been about sending a message, one carved into her memory with fear and violence. In the days that followed, the Johnsons packed their belongings. The home they had worked so hard for, the one they had chosen to raise their children in, was no longer safe. For every light they left on at night, for every lock double-checked, the memory of faceless masks and whispered threats loomed larger. And when the police reports quietly filed it as an attempted burglary, Alicia knew what had really happened. It wasn't just a break-in. It was a warning. Her story isn't isolated. Across countless towns and cities, families of color faced the same shadows, sometimes in the form of subtle glances, sometimes in cruel words, and sometimes in violence meant to drive them out. It's not always reported. It's not always believed. But it happens. And the silence surrounding it becomes its own weapon. For the Johnsons, survival meant starting over. For others, it doesn't end so cleanly. So the question lingers, when a family is told, "You don't belong here," how long before society itself answers back? How long before neighbors, communities, and institutions refuse to let that message spread unchecked? Because the truth is chilling, a home invasion is more than just an attack on walls and doors. It's an attack on belonging. And if belonging can be stolen in the night, then what safety do we really have? The next time you hear a bump in the dark, remember, it isn't always about what someone wants to take. Sometimes, it's about what they want to erase.